Welcome to A Line Through Time, where we take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. What's that? You're tired of these videos being collaborations? You know, I'm here trying to help good content creators get some much deserved exposure and you're only thinking about yourself. Dude, don't be a dick. Today we're celebrating Spyro the Dragon's return with the release of the Reignited trilogy, or we would be if it wasn't delayed until November, so let's just celebrate the 20th anniversary instead. We, of course, being myself and up-and-coming YouTuber Chris Gildart.
Hey man, thanks for inviting me on. I've been a big fan of Spyro for as long as I can remember. It, along with Crash, was my first experience with 3D platformers and became a large part of my childhood. It was games like Spyro and Crash that I not only grew up on, but it molded me into the gamer I am today. So I'm really glad we could take a look at this gaming icon in a format like this.
I'll shill Chris more at the end, but for now, let's talk Spyro. Insomniac Games' Spyro the Dragon debuted on the PlayStation on the 9th of September 1998. The series quickly rose to prominence as one of the two leading platformers vying for the role of mascot for the PlayStation brand to rival Mario and Sonic. The story follows a young dragon trying to save his fellows from a petrification spell cast on them by Nasty Nork, spelled with silent G's. Yeah, it's easy to see why this was labelled as a kid's game.
The sequel, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer for my European and Australian pals, released the following year. While attempting to go on vacation, Spyro ends up being summoned to another world to help stop the titular Ripto and his equally titular Rage. We're also introduced to much of the series' reoccurring cast such as the Professor and Spyro's new bestie, Hunter the Cheetah.
Spyro Year of the Dragon released in 2000 and marks the final entry Insomniac would work on before moving on to the Ratchet & Clank series. It also marks the first entry to release in the actual Year of the Dragon. This time Spyro is trying to save stolen dragon eggs and teams up with a group of new characters to shake up the gameplay formula. Spyro defeats the evil sorceress with help from her turncoat apprentice, Bianca. After this, Insomniac sold the franchise to the vendor Universal, who had also obtained Crash Bandicoot.
Spyro Season of Ice was released in 2001. The game was developed by Digital Eclipse and was Spyro's first adventure not only on a handheld, but on a non-Sony console. Spyro is tasked with saving fairies from the new villain Grendor. Bianca's appearance in this entry sets it after Year of the Dragon. Digital Eclipse followed this up less than a year later with Spyro 2 Season of Flame. The Fireflies of the Dragon Realms have been abducted by Ripto during Spyro's absence in Season of Ice. This causes the temperature to drop and the dragon's breath to turn into ice. You know, somewhere along the way, I feel like the titles of these games got mixed up during production.
2 months later, the series debuted on the PS2 and GameCube with Spyro Enter the Dragonfly, developed by Check 6 Games and Equinox Digital Entertainment. Set a year after Spyro 3, the game features Ripto as the villain again. Nasty Nork was also intended to appear since 3 set up the two teaming up, but he was cut. This time, Ripto's plotting to capture the dragonflies that have come to guard the baby dragons hatching from the egg Spyro saved last time. Ripto's dialogue in Season of Flame seems to indicate that he and Spyro have already fought multiple times by then. This, coupled with a few other hints, suggests to me that Enter the Dragonfly occurs between Year of the Dragon and Season of Ice.
June 2003 saw the series' first mobile entry, simply titled Spyro. And I swear, if you told me this was a bootleg game, I'd totally believe you. Spyro is helping the Fairy Queen to clothe the fairies in preparation for the royal ball being held to celebrate Spyro saving them in Season of Ice, presumably before Spyro returns home for Season of Flame.
Digital Eclipse wrapped up their portable trilogy that October with Spyro Attack of the Rhinox. Spyro is helping the Professor to seal a rift in space and time caused by one of his inventions while Ripto interferes. Wow, they really wanted Ripto to be the series Neo Cortex, didn't they? I mean, yeah, the alternatives were Nasty Nork, who is terrible, and the Sorceress, who is dead, so I guess this was the best option. Spyro wins and saves the day. We'll place it at the end of the timeline since there's nothing specific about its placement.
The following June, fans were treated to something earth-shattering, something that Sony fans, like myself, only dreamed of. Spyro always had something of a friendly rivalry with Crash Bandicoot. There were even demos of each series' games available on the other's discs. As such, a crossover between these two was something that fans would have died for in the 90s. But sadly, we got Crash Bandicoot Purple, Ripto's Rampage, and Spyro Orange, the Cortex Conspiracy on the Game Boy Advance, also known as Crash Bandicoot Fusion and Spyro Fusion in Europe. In these games, Ripto and Cortex team up to destroy their respective enemies, briefly pitting the two heroes against one another before teaming up and taking down the villains with the power of friendship.
Spyro and Crash have since made numerous cameos in each other's games, such as Spyro being playable in the non-canon GBA version of Crash Nitro Kart, and more significantly, appearing in a cutscene in Crash Twinsanity. Not just in the background like Crash's cameos in Spyro, attention is drawn to him as he breathes fire at 3 of the villains. Obviously, this would come after the crossover. I'll be discussing Crash in another episode, so for now, we'll place the 2 crossovers at the end here.
There was finally a new console entry that November, Eurocom Entertainment Software's Spyro: A Hero's Tale. For the first time since 2001, the game forewent the inclusion of Ripto, instead featuring a brand new villain, an evil former dragon elder named Red, who is essentially Shinnok from Mortal Kombat. And Nasty Nork, he's in there, from the first game. We never said the game was totally original. The game also sees Spyro meeting the professor's nephew, Blink, for the first time. Blink had previously appeared in Spyro Orange, setting this game before it. Only 10 days later, the Sega mobile game Spyro Ripto Quest was released to the world. Ripto has damaged the machines that protect the world of ice, grass, and fire, so the budding mechanic Spyro has to fix them. It's a direct continuation of Attack of the Rhinox, with Ripto escaping his imprisonment from that game.
2005's only entry was the Nintendo DS game Spyro Shadow Legacy. Red returns, working for the game's antagonist, the Sorcerer, who has trapped everyone in the Shadow Realm.
He crossed this nigger into the Shadow Realm!
Red's presence sets the game after a hero's tale, but where does it go in relation to the crossovers? In this game, Spyro masters the martial arts known as Dragon Kata while he fights in his usual manner in Orange. It's safe to assume that Orange occurs after Spyro's first battle with Red, but before he has to learn Dragon Kata to fight him again. There are most likely a couple Crash games between Crash Purple and Twinsanity, but Shadow Legacy really does feel like the end of an era, so on the Spyro side, we'll place Shadow Legacy after Twinsanity.
Now, even though Dragon Kata was a marvel of innovative gameplay, 2006's The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning is, as the name suggests, a reboot of the franchise. How could they not continue his Dragon Kata journey? Developed by Chrome Studios and later Étrange Libellule, the Legend trilogy is a multi-platform reimagining of the Spyro mythos, starring Elijah Wood and a very phoned-in David Spade as Spyro and his dragonfly friend Sparks. It was followed by The Eternal Night and Dawn of the Dragon in 2007 and 2008 respectively. It's a fairly straightforward storyline that never went past the 3rd entry.
It's kind of weird when you think about it that there is the Legend trilogy, the first reboot of this classic PS1 franchise, which saw 3 entries release, one in 2006, one in 2007 and one in 2008, before it was rebooted again in an even more different form than what the first 2 incarnations of the franchise were. It really makes you think. In July 2008, even before Dawn of the Dragon released, Vivendi Games merged with Activision to help form Activision Blizzard. Spyro was redesigned and used to launch the Skylanders Toys to Life franchise in 2011, which also features Spark, Cinder and Malfoy from the Legend trilogy. It's kind of weird that there weren't more Spyro characters in Skylanders like Hunter or James Bird. You'd think those characters would be a perfect fit.
I'm not gonna lie, this series is actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good. That Crash level in Imaginators was pretty damn sweet. Skylanders would see yearly releases until 2016 with Spyro's Adventure, Giant, Swap Force, Trap Team, Superchargers and Imaginators. And the mobile games Cloud Patrol, Battlegrounds, Lost Islands, Collection Vault, Superchargers, Racing and Battlecast. Then there's the prequel novels, The Machine of Doom and the 8-part Mask of Power series. Then the IDW comic that's set between games and the Netflix show Skylanders Academy that's acted its own continuity and once featured Crash Bandicoot, and My Childhood Didn't Die, it was murdered.
If Skylanders ever gets a timeline, I think Snake will do it separately. But thanks to Skylanders, Spyro has at least been around for the last decade, unlike Crash, even if he was one of the most useless characters in Skylanders. But seeing Spyro go from at least 1 entry a year to riding the coattails of some toy-to-life trend, it kinda kills my inner 8-year-old self just a little bit.
Almost as much as inverting his breath and RAM controls from his classic games.
Fortunately, thanks to the success of the Insane trilogy, a PS4 remake of the first 3 Crash games from the ground up, Spyro is receiving the same treatment in the form of the Spyro Reignited trilogy, developed by Toys for Bob, the same team behind Skylanders. Hopefully, the franchise will be able to return to form with new entries in the future.
The series has also had 4 cancelled entries. Spyro Ever After was to be an educational game where Spyro meets famous fairy tale characters. Agent 9 was a James Bond parody spin-off starring Agent 9 from Spyro 3. After it was cancelled, the idea was reworked into a proper Spyro game set in a desert before it too was cancelled. Spyro's Kingdom was a planned darker Spyro game with blood and probably other edgy trash. Toys for Bob didn't like the direction it was taking and reworked it into the original Skylanders. Obviously, these don't count in the timelines, but it's fun to discuss them.
So that's the franchise as a whole on its 20th anniversary. 2 main timelines and a couple of spin-off timelines where Spyro is a prominent character. So without further ado, the Spyro the Dragon timelines, that aren't a part of Skylanders go a little something like this.
Original timeline. Nasty Nork invades the Dragon Realms and transforms the Elder Dragons into statues. The youngest dragon, Spyro, defeats Nork and saves the other dragons. While attempting to take a vacation in the Dragon Shores, the portal takes Spyro to the land of Avalar, where he helps to defeat the sorcerer, Ripto. During the Year of the dragon eggs are stolen by Bianca, the apprentice of the sorceress. Spyro pursues her to the Forgotten Realms, where Bianca rebels and helps him to defeat the sorceress. The celebrations are interrupted when Ripto returns and scatters the guardian dragonflies. Spyro defeats Ripto again and returns the dragonflies to their assigned dragons. The Rhinoc Grendor becomes corrupted by a miscast spell and invades the fairy realms, freezing the fairies in ice. Spyro frees the fairies and defeats Grendor, restoring him to his true self. Spyro helps the fairies prepare for a royal ball in celebration. Upon returning home, Spyro learns that Ripto has stolen the fireflies, preventing the dragons from breathing fire. Spyro travels to Ripto's volcano to defeat him once again. One of the professor's failed experiments creates a rift in space and time. Spyro acquires the 12 hearts of the Dragon Realms to close the rift, and traps Ripto inside the device that caused the rift. Ripto manages to escape and his army attacks the worlds of fire, ice and grass. Spyro once again defeats Ripto and his army. The banished Elder Dragon, Red, teams up with Nasty Nork to corrupt the Dragon Realms with the Dark Gems. Spyro destroys the gems and defeats the two. Ripto joins forces with Dr. Neo Cortex to defeat their respective enemies, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. After the plot to make the two fights fails, Spyro and Crash team up to defeat their enemies and return to their own worlds. Spyro returns to Crash's world to retrieve gems stolen by the evil twins. The people of the Dragon Realms, Avalar and the Forgotten Realms become trapped in the Shadow Realm by the Sorcerer and Red. Spyro masters the art of Dragon Kata and uses it to defeat Red, who then assists Spyro in defeating the Sorcerer. Now armed with Dragon Kata, Spyro will be ready for when the Sorcerer returns.
Legend timeline. Malfoy, the first purple dragon, wages war with his race. He is sealed in the Well of Souls by the Elder Dragons. Centuries later, his army attacks the Dragon Temple in an attempt to destroy the legendary purple dragon egg before it hatches. The fire dragon Reignited sends the egg down the river where it is found by a family of dragonflies. The egg hatches and the dragon is named Spyro. Malfoy takes the black dragon egg and corrupts the baby dragon into serving as his agent Cinder. Years later, Spyro and his foster brother Spark set out to discover his true identity. He trains under the Dragon Guardians to harness the power of the elements. Spyro uses his power to defeat Cinder and releases her from Malfoy's influence. Malfoy's general, Gaul, attempts to use Cinder in a ritual to release Malfoy. Spyro harnesses the power of the lunar alignment to kill Gaul and seals himself, Cinder, and Sparks in crystal as the Well of Souls collapses around them. Malfoy is released from the well and continues his conquest. 3 years later, the trio are released from the crystal and finally defeat Malfoy, ending his threat for good.
And that's the end of Spyro outside of Skylanders, unless the Reignited trilogy leads to a proper revival. Assuming it does, I think any new games would likely be set in a new continuity branching off after the first 3 games. And maybe they won't ruin Hunter's design this time. I mean, Jesus. But whatever happens with the series, you can be sure that I'll be there to cover it. Maybe with a certain special guest, who knows?
As I said before, the Spyro series has always been a part of me as a gamer, and I wanted to thank Snake for letting me come on here and babble about my favorite platforming mascot ever. I honestly hope you'll have me on again sometime in the future.
Well, yeah, that's what I was implying.
And I think we can be pretty confident that the Reignited trilogy will have just as high a quality as the Insane trilogy. Maybe this will spark future returns to classics of a bygone era. Hey Sony, how about you remake Legend of Dragoon next, you cowards?
If you liked this video, why not subscribe and check out some of Chris's videos? If not, then make sure to check out Chris's stuff anyway so you can watch at least one good video today.
Your old friend Spyro has been searching the islands. Your old friend Spyro.